If you're looking for clear pro-life thinking, cutting-edge apologetics, and a fresh approach to abortion dialogue, you've come to the right place. This is the Equipped for Life podcast.
So this is going to be a different Equipped for Life podcast because I am here in Dublin, Ireland with two really cool young pro-life people. Ben and Muireann from Minimise Project, which has kind of become one of my new favorite pro-life organizations, like easily my top 5 right now.
Holy moly.
Which to be fair, like they've already kind of said they've been influenced by us a lot. So it's a little bit like looking in a mirror. I don't know how meaningful it is that I like you guys so much, but I do really like you guys a lot and have been impressed with. I've spent a lot more time with Ben up until now, and just impressed by how smart he was. I kind of want to hire you, but I don't think that I should hire all the smart pro-life Ireland people because you guys have your own battle over here to fight. But I just wanted to get you on. Let's just talk a little bit about because we're sort of, in a parallel in a lot of ways. You're dealing with similar issues with pro-choice people as us. I think you're also dealing with similar issues with pro-life people as us, and we're all trying to figure that out. We're kind of young pro-lifers trying to figure out what is the most effective thing to do, and there's a lot of challenges that come with that. And so we've just recorded a podcast with you guys, so we'll be sharing what that was. That was more of an interview with me. Now I get to turn the tables and talk to you guys a little bit. So for our audience, and we have a lot of people listening from different countries, but certainly the majority still in America. Talk a little bit about the history of abortion in Ireland, and especially kind of what happened in 2018 and what led up to what happened in 2018.
Okay, so I'm slightly older than Ben.
Young at heart, though,
young at
right?
heart,
You
for
seem
sure.
young at heart to me.
So technically abortion has always been illegal in Ireland up until 2018. Since before the foundation of the Irish state, even there was a piece of legislation when Ireland was part of the United Kingdom from, I think, 1862 that remained in force through the foundation of the state right up through the 50s, 60s, 70s. But then what happened was Roe versus Wade happened, and that rocked things here. But one of the things that was very interesting was that where abortion was being introduced all around the world, it was nearly always through the court system. It was very rarely through a parliamentary process or through kind of a direct democratic process. Yeah. So what happened was the pro-life movement in Ireland, what they wanted to do is they wanted to get a constitutional amendment in that explicitly prohibited abortion, which would have meant that abortion would have remained illegal as long as it remained in the Constitution, because the Constitution can only be changed by a majority vote. Right. And they were successful. They got all the main political parties to sign up to commit to holding a referendum, and they did in 1983, and that referendum was passed. It was the 8th Amendment to the Irish Constitution, and it guaranteed the equal right to life of the unborn. 10 years later or so, in 1992, there was a very difficult case called the X case. I won't get too much into the details behind it, but it wound up in front of the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court found that the 8th Amendment did allow for abortion in the case where the mother had a suicidal ideation. And in 2013, enabling legislation for that judgment was passed. So in 2013, for the first time, we had specific legislation that mostly prohibited abortion, but that allowed it in certain cases where there was a threat to the life of the mother, including from suicidal ideation. And then from there was a massive push up until 2018 when we had the final referendum. But there was a very high profile case actually where a woman called Savita Halappanavar, she was 17 weeks pregnant, she was miscarrying, she had sepsis, and unfortunately the hospital missed it, and she repeatedly requested an abortion, but obviously that was illegal in Ireland, and then she ended up dying. And that case rocked the nation, completely changed opinion overnight. And then eventually there was a commitment to hold a referendum in 2018, and it passed by a 2/3 majority.
Almost pretty much the exact reverse of the majority that passed the 1983 amendment in the first place.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Is that a good synopsis, Ben?
I think that's great. Yeah, there was a 2002 referendum to try and remove the suicide ground as well, which almost passed. There was a bit of a split in the pro-life movement over that, which actually made it not pass.
Okay.
But we came very close to passing a piece of pro-life referendum again in 2002, but that actually failed.
Yeah, and we should acknowledge as well that there was a significant pro-life no component. It was really over legal technicalities that the split occurred, and I would have been on the yes side. I wasn't old enough to vote, but I would have been on the yes side. Ben would have been as well. But it's just really important not to just to make clear that we don't in any way doubt the strong pro-life credentials of the people who just felt for whatever reason they had to vote against that.
Sure.
But had that passed, things would have been a lot different. For example, legislation would have been passed before that to enable life-saving treatment, because there was a kind of a legal grey area, and there was a reluctance to legislate simply because you couldn't legislate for, well, here's when you can save the life of the woman without also legislating for, and here's when you have to allow abortion in the case of suicide.
Yeah.
So maybe if that legislation had passed, things would have been clearer. Maybe Savita's life would have been saved. Who knows? There's an awful lot of roads not taken in the Irish pro-life movement, as indeed in the American one.
Yeah, and then of course the Savita case itself, the actual details of that case, the precise timeline of when, when things could have been detected, when things should have been detected, when interventions could have been made. The point that anyone who looks at the story should emerge convinced of is that abortion being legal was not necessary to save her life.
Right.
Had she had an abortion she requested, it perhaps would have saved her life almost by accident, right? Because when she was requesting it to begin with, she didn't know she had sepsis.
Right.
But it's certainly the case that if you look at it, that it wouldn't have been necessary for abortion to be legal to save her life. There were things you could have done that would have been sufficient to save her life that didn't need abortion to be legal. That's the kind of nuance that generally gets lost in the debate over here. When you start talking about necessary and sufficient conditions to save somebody's life, you're like, but that's the truth, and that's important.
Yeah.
But it's not the narrative.
Yeah, this has been a thing that as I've been doing these talks around the country, I've been kind of encouraging people. And it was like, people need to actually not just kind of know in the back of their mind vaguely what happened with Savita Halappanavar. They need to be able to teach it. They need to be able to explain, here's the timeline, here's how badly her medical team screwed up, because she died due to basically doctors' incompetence. They caught the sepsis so much later than it should have been caught. And then the issue, where they also didn't understand that this was a potentially life-threatening pregnancy, which your law still allowed for. And so it was they messed up on two huge levels. And it's not, as far as we know from kind of the research that we did on this about a year ago, it's super obvious that she wouldn't have died anyway. It's kind of really hard to tell, but certainly they didn't need to make abortion legal to save future Savitas. You might need medical teams better trained to find, to diagnose sepsis and to understand the laws and the lines and the laws and stuff. But it was a really frustrating case where I felt like the pro-choice or pro-abortion choice movement, both here and in the States, as well as the media, really jumped on and used this tragic woman's story to push a political agenda, which is gross.
Yeah, and what really bothers me about it is, if you look at the logic of the argument, it's essentially saying that Savita was responsible for her own medical care. I mean, what is the treatment for sepsis in pregnancy? It's, deliver immediately and broad spectrum IV antibiotics. She requested an abortion, and everyone's like, the reason she didn't get that was because it was illegal. What if she'd requested broad spectrum IV antibiotics? Should she have got the? No. I mean, you don't. Doctors don't prescribe on patients' requests. No one. If you say that the reason she should have gotten an abortion was because she asked for one, then you're saying it was up to her to happen to request the life-saving medical treatment that she was entitled to.
Yeah.
And nobody makes that point.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm pro-life. If I were in Savita's situation, I've had a miscarriage, and it happened.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah, us too. Yeah.
Thank you. And it did happen naturally. Now, if it hadn't, I would have gone into hospital or whatever. But happened naturally at home. That was what worked for me.
Right.
If I'd been in Savita's position, I don't think I would have requested an abortion, which means I would have still died a slow, horrible, preventable, tragic death.
Right.
But there would not have been protests in the street.
Right.
My husband would not have been given primetime interviews on television. I would not have become a household name. I would have just been another victim of the Irish health system.
Right.
Purely because I hadn't happened to request an abortion. She did happen to request an abortion. And the logic of that is never brought out by either side, by the way. Certainly not by the pro-choice side, but not by the pro-life side either.
Yeah, that's interesting. If anyone who's listening ends up getting into like internet debates about Savita's case, I'll say we created a resource last year that you can find at equalrightsinstitute.com/memes, because we made this thing. It was like this huge webinar, but then this huge like 4,000 word article. Basically, there's like responding to snarky memes, basically, and because there were all these pro-choice memes that blew up when the heartbeat bills happened in America last year, and so it was kind of like we took like 11 or 12 categories and wrote kind of template responses for all of them, and it's kind of like, it's not really meant for people to literally just copy and paste. But that's better than nothing. I don't want people to feel like they have to like start from nothing, start from scratch.
Here's how to think about this.
Right.
Yeah.
And one of the main categories of pro-choice memes we were seeing were specifically about Savita, HELP, and FR. And so we created a 2-paragraph response on that. So if anyone wants to kind of see like, this will at least get you started, you can feel free to like make it your own or do more research or make it more detailed. But certainly they can find that there. So tell us a little bit about both of you and how you got involved in the pro-life movement, and talk about Minimise Project, because then that's going to lead into what I'm really interested in talking about.
So there was a group in we're sort of atypical members of the Minimise Project to some extent. So that we didn't come from the usual source. There was a group in Trinity College Dublin which is like Students for Life of Trinity. It was an unofficial pro-life society. A lot of pro-life societies can't be official in Ireland because there's a kind of, a lot of universities have this standard where it's like, well, we don't have a pro-life society or a pro-choice society. We just have a student union, which is totally pro-choice, and they organize all the pro-choice events. Yeah. But you can't organize any pro-life events because we don't have a pro-choice or a pro-life society.
This is a big problem. You guys need to be fighting this big time. Call it censorship, call it cowardice.
Anyway, so that's the thing. So there's an unofficial pro-life society in Trinity, which had a blog and did very well, and a lot of the people in that really admired you guys and secular pro-life, and a lot of these kind of new wave of pro-life movement organizations that were trying to do things a little bit differently, trying to approach the issue in a way that it maybe hadn't been approached as much in the past, trying to very much talk to pro-choice people where they were at, and speak that language, I guess, like, because we've got pro-choice friends, and we've got people we have these conversations, and we share a lot of other assumptions that aren't to do with abortion with our friends there, and so how to talk to people in a way that isn't bizarre or weird. And so this group kind of built up, and then a lot of people from it graduated. Myself and Muireann were not in that group. We came on from different areas. I was involved with Oxford Students for Life. I was the co-president of that for a while. Muireann kind of came into the group through sort of friends, right?
I think it was literally Facebook.
Nice.
There was
something good happened as a result of Facebook.
Right? There was an article written. It was shared by the Students for Life page or something like that, and I was on maternity leave at the time, and when you're on maternity leave, you spend a lot of time online,
reading, right?
And I was in a couple of pro-life groups. Things were really heating up to the referendum, and people started sharing links from here, there, and everywhere. So there was one this article, and I just hopped over, left maybe 2-3 comments, whatever. Right. Totally schooled some pro-choice person. I was immature.
Been there, done that.
And then I just got a private message from Ben's girlfriend, actually, just saying, "Hey, I hope this isn't weird, but you seem kind of cool. Any chance you'd guest blog for us?" And I was like, "Okay." So I wrote a guest blog, and then from there it kind of snowballed. And I guess it started coming along to meetings, and we'd spent a long time, actually, the guts of a year, just talking about what we wanted to do, getting our vision straight, coming up with, did we want to be a blog? Who are we talking to? Who is our target audience? What do we even believe?
Yeah. That's hard.
Yeah, and it kind of stopped and started a lot, but there was a really sad case where there was a woman who was told that her baby had Edwards syndrome. They had an abortion, and then the final diagnostic test came back to reveal that actually the baby did not have Edwards syndrome.
That happens.
And when that happened, I was just like, guys, we need to launch ASAP. We need this. I can't sit around and watch this happen anymore.
Just created a call. There was a call. It was a bit of a joke in the meetings where we'd say, we divide ourselves into team patient and team impatient. So Muireann and I were actually team impatient, or we were some of the leading members of it anyway. But the team patient people and the team impatient people really contributed to it because. Yeah. The patient people made sure that we actually had our ducks in a row. Make sure that we weren't going off half-cocked. Make sure that we were going to be able to commit to putting up a blog post every week. Yeah. That we were going to know exactly who we were talking to. In terms of who we are talking to, we're somewhere between you and secular pro-life. Yeah. In the sense that secular pro-life we see is very much like targeting pro-choice people directly. Yep. And you guys are talking to pro-life people about how to do that. Right. And we've all been shaped by having just conversations in which people have said the following words to us. I haven't quite thought about it in that way before. Or some variant of that, right? Yeah. All of us found that was our common experience.
That doesn't sound so dumb.
Right? It's like, wow, you're not, your head isn't swiveling. You're not insane, Right. And actually the issue is I remember talking to a class of students from Denmark at one point. Very, very sort of secular, very pro-choice. They were on a civics class trip, 17, 18-year-olds to Ireland. And they met a bunch of pro-choice politicians, and I was like interning with a pro-life organization at the time, and I ended up being the only pro-lifer to talk to them, and I was like, but I used the equal rights argument.
Oh, nice!
Right, so I actually talked to them, and I let it all play out. I let them all there was a guy messing at the back, they all looked super skeptical, but I just kept asking them and saying, okay, what is it that we all have in common? That grounds our equality, that makes us equal. If we're equal, there must be something the same about us. And what is it? And they were like, okay, we buy that. And they put their hands up and they had to go at it, and they had, people came up with different things. And eventually, of course, somebody puts up his hand and goes, well, because we're human. Yeah. And I tell you, they walked out of that class with like faces like this.
Just stoic.
Right, super stoic. And the teachers came up to me and were like, that was probably the best presentation. And I was like, I'm just an intern, but I just happened to use the equal rights argument. I happened to talk about it in an intelligent way. And they wrote to me afterwards, the teachers, saying that people said that even though they didn't agree, the class started out not agreeing with me at all. I don't know how many of them ultimately did end up agreeing with me, if any. But they did say that was their favorite of the people they met. That was their favorite interaction.
So interesting.
Because it was going below the surface. It wasn't just confirming people on what they already thought. Yeah. And I thought, okay, that can work. That kind of way of talking about it can work with like perhaps the least sympathetic audience you could have there. Yeah. And I've had the same things repeated in other environments. And so it was like, okay, can we turn this into something? Can we make an organization in Ireland that tries to use this approach, that tries to both spread this approach and use it directly, both creating those things that we can send to our pro-choice friends and people like them, and also to share to other pro-lifers, to say, okay, here's a way of talking about this that works.
Yeah. Okay, so then you guys basically end up deciding you're a blog, but you're a podcast now. Officially one episode in the tank, and like what else would you say that you do? Like I think I get your mission is you're kind of trying to help pro-life people be more effective here. You're trying to reach pro-choice people. What are all the different ways that you're doing that?
Yeah, so I guess we decided quite early on to specifically target the goal of minimizing the abortion rate, and that's where our name ultimately came from. Yeah. And one of the early names that was thrown out, I think, just as a placeholder, was Project Zero, and we already liked that, but it sounded a bit sci-fi. There's already a security company called Project Zero, whatever. But we settled on the Minimise Project in the end, and the reason for that was because we really want to meet these middle ground people. And these people who say, well, I don't like abortion, but I don't, it's like, well, okay, fine, come talk to us about that, let's minimize it. We don't have to say how low is low enough.
Right. You want to minimize it to zero. You're just not necessarily starting with that.
And I think that was a very clever move by it was Kira, actually, Ben's girlfriend, who came up with that idea.
Smart girl.
So keep coming up, you know.
And then so I suppose the original blog that Students for Life had done well. You know, it had reached some of the upper echelons of the pro-life movement, at least. And some posts in particular did very well. And we one of the things that was very important, still is very important to us, is we don't want to lose good relations with the existing pro-life organisations within Ireland. There's enough division already. So we wanted to make it very clear that we're looking to be complements and not substitutes for the pro-life advocacy that's already taking place.
That's great.
And we don't think that there is a kind of a good pro-life resource like a blog out there. So we said originally we were going to focus on the blog. And have it, you know, I wish, I remember saying to my husband once, I wish I didn't care about this. You know, I'd love to be able to just turn off this part of my brain that does not ever stop thinking about
I identify with this.
I know. But, you know, it's like, okay, well, let's put this to good use. Ben and I spend an insane amount of time thinking about abortion. Let's do the thinking for you. Maybe you hardly ever think about it, but someone just throws a good, you know, a curveball at you, and instead of you just being flummoxed by it, come to our blog.
Pose an interesting question and an article title and an answer.
And we hope we're still very new, right? So we're still, you know, we launched late last year. What month did we launch again?
August.
Right, and so we've actually not been in existence for a very long time. We really wanted to kind of prove to ourselves that we could keep the blog going, that we'd be able to put a post every week, and we've very much in the main, with like 1 or 2 gaps, have hit that or exceeded it.
Really good.
And then sort of build up our following there. We're very much open to doing more things. So we're hoping to talk to. We've had some, just due to organizational stuff, some of the college pro-life groups have wanted us to come and talk to them.
Good.
And do some workshops on how to approach some of this stuff. They haven't actually happened yet. We're very much hoping they will in the next few months.
That's fantastic.
And I think the podcast idea, that kind of, well, I'm a huge podcast fan, but that kind of particularly grew out of the fact of there are some blogs that I haven't written simply because I know they would be 3,000 words long.
Right.
There is some topics that you just can't do justice in a blog. So I was like, you know what, we're getting a couple of microphones and we're just, you know, we're just going to do a couple of episodes that just get right into a particular aspect that requires more than a blog. So we're still in exploration mode, growth phase, seeing where it takes us. But I have to say, like, this is going to sound weird, but it's been so enjoyable. Like, I look forward to the meetings. It's, you know, it can be so depressing being a pro-life person sometimes, and particularly in Ireland over the last 2 years.
You just had your Roe v. Wade here.
We did, and you know, this is giving me, you know, it's giving me a lift. It's giving me hope, and I'm learning so much. And I love to learn.
So I love that. I think your guys' name is brilliant because no one knows what it means right away. Which is partly why we call ourselves Equal Rights Institute. Like, what does that mean? Like you want people to ask about it and you can explain it than just like judge you right off the top. It's like, what's Minimise Project? Like, it's excellent. So I wanted to ask you about something that I know that you guys have been dealing with, and because it's something that we have dealt with too, which is dealing with different factions in the pro-life movement. Like, Ireland is a relatively small country, you know, like I drove across it today. It took like 3 hours or so. It wasn't like this huge thing, like takes 5 days, you know, in America. And yet you have factions in your movement too. You've got like, you guys are kind of this young, hip, you know, cool, you know, pro-life group or whatever.
That could sound a bit lame.
You've got, yeah, I know. Who says hip anymore? That just means like you're not it. You're trying to do this kind of don't be weird stuff. And then you've got some other pro-life groups that seem to be relatively effective. And then you've got, you know, a guy literally protesting outside of hospitals with white baby coffins whose pictures end up in the papers all the time. So you've got kind of these different groups of people. And I'm interested in, clearly you're trying to figure out how are we going to work with these different groups of people. And that's something that we think about a lot and are still trying to figure out how to work with people and be respectful while also helping to shape the pro-life movement into a more effective movement. What are you guys thinking about that? What have you guys figured out?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the differences, there's definitely factions here. Some of those differences track the differences that you guys have seen in the States. So the classic one being some people in our movement are more comfortable with using graphic images, some people are less. But then there's also specific kind of historical points of division. So in that 2002 referendum we mentioned about removing the suicide grant, one of the major pro-life groups in the country took one side of that and the other took the other. And there was a lot of just animosity about that and mutual anger and things like that. And also because the country's so small, everybody kind of knows everybody personally to some extent, or at least you're pretty close to knowing everybody personally. There just aren't that many people. You can't be that separated from the other people in the pro-life movement. So our thing, as Muireann said, was very much to be complements but not substitutes, to do some stuff that we kind of saw not being done to the same extent or in particular ways. Collaborating where we agree and sort of trying to do our own thing constructively where we don't.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to the coffins, they just seem to be counterproductive.
Right.
It just seems that those images are on the front of all the papers. People really react badly to it.
Yeah.
The context is even different from the States because a lot of our abortions now are happening in maternity hospitals or in family doctor or general practitioner clinics. The dynamics is different, and it seems to be like actively not helping.
Yeah.
And in that situation, you have to say that to some extent. You have to say, look, we don't think this is helping, and that causes some tensions.
Yeah.
And we're still kind of a young movement, and we're still trying to work out exactly how to negotiate a lot of that.
Yeah.
We were chatting to you about it when we were interviewing you for our
Right.
podcast, because we're not sure we have all the answers or even close to it on that.
Yeah.
But we really want to actually minimize the abortion rate down to zero, and we want to achieve that, and we want to be able to talk to pro-choicers with that view in mind, and to people in the middle ground with that goal in mind, and with the goal of genuinely listening to each other, and this makes that harder.
Yeah.
And so to a certain extent, you do have to say, look, I don't agree, and you don't want to be known as those people who just spend all the time criticizing your own side,
Right.
Because we don't want to do that with people who are interested.
Really easy to fall into that.
Right, and it can give you kind of a rush because you'd be like, we're the reasonable,
right?
But in the same way as I would totally respect the sincerity of people who are doing that.
Sure.
I really want people who are sympathetic to that kind of approach to respect our sincerity and to realize that we disagree with you on this because we really care about the issue and about saving lives.
You're not ageist. That's not the problem.
No,
right?
no. And it's not just that we're virtue signaling either. It's not just that we're just trying to make ourselves look good or trying to sort of not change anything.
Or you're too non-confrontational.
No, it's just we think this is actually counterproductive. And so we want to do things that work rather than things that don't.
What?
Astounding. But I'm not even to be sarcastic about it, just to be like, but we are as sincere as you know, and that we're every bit as passionate, but we have a disagreement about what the best way to proceed is.
Yeah, and it's tricky. I mean, it's tricky, especially when sometimes you're dealing with people who literally don't care about being effective, and they'll tell you that it's like, I'm not trying to be effective. I'm trying to be prophetic, or I'm trying to highlight the issue or whatever. We talk a lot about that on the other podcast we just recorded, so I'll just go listen to that. They have a great podcast. Go listen, because we did a long discussion about that we don't have time for right now. But certainly that's difficult. Okay, final question. How can the American pro-life movement help you? I mean, they should certainly like you on Facebook. They should subscribe to the podcast, all of that. I've read 4 of your articles. I liked all of them. They're really, really insightful. So I like the way that you think. So if people like us, then you're gonna like them because there's a lot in common. But beyond that, I just imagine, I had this experience in Denmark a couple of years ago that just caused me. I mean, I learned a lot of things, but one of the things that I just did not expect was just to grow this real sincere affection for the pro-life community there. I got to be around I think their whole pro-life movement, all 60 of them. They're underground. There's this beautiful little courageous movement in a real counter-cultural context. But I grew very, very fond of them during my time there, which is I think predictably happened here in Ireland. And I think that's going to keep on happening. And it's made me, where I didn't used to care that much about traveling around internationally and trying to equip people, Like I did in Canada a lot, but I feel like that hardly counts. It just seems like North America, like whatever. And now it's like, hey, I definitely want to go around helping more than I have, because it's like my feeling in Denver was like, there's these beautiful brothers and sisters here that I didn't ever think of. I didn't know really existed, but they're here. They're struggling. We have a lot in common. And it seemed that what we had to offer was particularly helpful in countercultural contexts like theirs, and perhaps Ireland. And so certainly I care about helping you guys in other communities, but just for our listeners who are like, hey, but what about me? Like, it's like just everyday pro-life advocates, is there anything that they could do that would be particularly helpful for a group like yours or a movement like yours?
I mean, aside from the obvious things like liking and sharing and subscribing, sometimes it can get tiring all day trying to be charitable, see the other side, present pro-choice arguments to other pro-life people to try to help them nuance their responses. Sometimes you just want to shut the door and just vent about how hard it is. So I suppose some friendships, just whether it's online or whether it's just kind of mutual articles and stuff that we can kind of share to build each other up. I'd love to get a kind of a, particularly on a platform such as Twitter, that is just insanely left-leaning, and I don't mean left in kind of an economic sense, but just in terms of like kind of the left liberal type of it can be really, you just feel like you're in the trenches sometimes, and it just the hand of friendship and just providing kind of a space where, okay, we might feel like we're in a minority within a minority over here, but if there was an equal minority within the pro-life minority in the States, it'd be great to be able to connect a bit more and just feel less alone. Feel like there's a bit of a family out there, like you described us as brothers and sisters. What do you think, Ben?
I think that's great. I think there's also that can also facilitate a really productive sharing of ideas. We were saying that we really admire you guys' like empirical focus. You guys have done so much work in terms of testing out different approaches, having loads of conversations, figuring out what works, figuring out what appeals to people, how to speak to people, how to have real meaningful deep conversations with people. And we are benefiting from that because we can see some of the stuff that you've achieved and tweak it and alter it and customize it to the Irish context. That we don't have the same sort of culture of having like stands at university campuses that you guys do, so you have to figure out different ways of approaching the same kind of thing. But workshopping ideas, throwing things back and forth between, with the internet and all this, there's no reason why it has to be all these isolated countries doing their own bit to advance the project of coming up with the most effective forms of pro-life advocacy. So let's bounce ideas back and forth.
I love that idea.
Let's actually be in touch. Let's say, if you want to leave a comment that you say, I really liked how this was done. I wonder, could you try doing it this way as well? Rather than just, bah, we don't like that. or even, and we welcome, and this is much better. If you only want to do this, please do this. But even, even saying we like that, but also kind of, and have you thought about applying it in this way too? Sort of a sense of friendly collaboration and fellowship.
Okay, I just had an idea, but I'm going to tell you after we're done recording, but I've got at least the kernel of an idea. It's in its embryonic stage, but I've got an idea that if we do, I think we might end up making public down the road. I've got an idea. As far as friendship goes, I volunteer myself as tribute. I would be happy to be your friends and continue the discussion, but I love the idea of getting more people involved in... Yeah, I think I've got an idea. So stay tuned because it's the kind of thing.
Still ideas with full moral status.
That's true. That's true. Luckily, your level of development doesn't change your value, right? So, everything. It's all equal. If they're a human, no, never mind. This is getting crazy. No, it might not. Might start. It's starting to lose the analogy as the farther we go. Well. Ben, Muireann, I just appreciate you so much. I'm so glad that you're here. I'm so tempted to try to poach you guys, but I shouldn't because I think Ireland needs you. But I'm so glad that you're here. It's always encouraging chatting with you guys and hanging out with young pro-life leaders like you that are like, hey, I was awesome in college, and now past college, I'm going to keep on being awesome in the pro-life movement. Like, that is just super cool. So
and thank you, and thanks both for coming here, and thanks for just doing what you do, because without the Equal Rights Institute, no Minimise Project, really. Like that's
sweet.
You know, you inspired us, really.
Yeah.
Well, I can't wait till the next time we get to work in the same place again. So until that time, God bless you guys.
Thanks, Mel.
Thank you for listening to the Equipped for Life podcast, a project of Equal Rights Institute. Equal Rights Institute uses speaking, writing, YouTube videos, podcasts, online courses, and campus outreach to help pro-life advocates in the areas of practical dialogue tips, relational apologetics, pro-life philosophy, and sidewalk counseling. If you've been helped by this podcast, please consider supporting it by making a donation at equalrightsinstitute.com.